Thanks for joining us on Chicago Tonight. I'm Brandis Friedman. Paris Schutz will join us shortly. Here's what we're looking at.
Please permit me to apologize.
The longest-serving alderman in Chicago's history casts his final vote. A look at Ed Burke's last day in City Hall.
This meeting is adjourned.
Meanwhile, Lori Lightfoot gives no goodbye at her final meeting as mayor. That and more in Spotlight Politics.
Chicago and Springfield can work together.
Chicago's next mayor visits the Capitol and receives a mixed reception.
The people are here tonight to speak, so we're asking that we be heard.
A packed house as community members share what they want to see in their next police superintendent. And music, fashion, and photography at the heart of an exhibition at the Art Institute. Now to Paris for our top story tonight. Paris.
Brandis, an era in Chicago politics comes to an end today as 14th Ward Alderman Ed Burke cast his final votes as a member of the Chicago City Council. It capstones his career with a bit more pomp and circumstance than you might expect for a politician facing federal corruption charges. WTTW News reporter Heather Sharon joins us now for a look at Ed Burke's swan song. Heather, until his indictment in 2019, Burke ran City Hall with an iron fist, at least the Finance Committee, frequently stopping in council meetings to discuss his favorite subjects, including Chicago history. He picked up on that theme today as he looked back on his career.
I've attended the funerals of 147 police officers who have been killed in the line of duty, and 96 Chicago firefighters who also lost their lives in the line of duty.
I know many on council saw him as the poet laureate, as the historian of the council. How will he be remembered?
Well, he wants to be remembered as one of Chicago's great statesmen, somebody who wielded power for the benefit of Chicagoans and the institutions that make up the city. His record complicates that issue, right? Because even though he was elected in 1969 before the moon landing, he wielded that power in the 1980s to thwart Chicago's first black mayor, Harold Washington, and that is the centerpiece of his legacy, even though he served for decades after Washington's death.
Yeah, it's amazing. That short period of time, 40 years ago, is a big part of his legacy. He said he didn't think he would address his colleagues today, but he did decide to speak after listening to several colleagues pay warm tributes to him. So let's listen to what Alderman Jason Ervin had to say.
Don't let this job kill you. He said the ballot box, the pine box, or the jury box, don't let those take you out of here. It's life after this.
So this is Ervin recounting advice that Burke had given him. What does this say about the source of his power at City Hall?
Well, he really used that institutional knowledge to mentor alder people like Ervin, appointed in 2011 by former Mayor Richard M. Daley. And not only did he teach them how the City Council operates, he came bearing checks. He used his millions of dollars in campaign cash to help alder people who were just getting started in their political career. And we heard time and again from people across the political spectrum that they were grateful for that mentorship, despite the fact that he is facing 14 counts of corruption.
And despite all the warmth and good feelings, it did seem like Burke kind of addressed that a little bit, or the fact that he's leaving under a bit of a dark cloud. Let's take a look.
In politics, there are no permanent enemies, no permanent friends, only permanent interests. If I have failed during these past 54 years in achieving that goal, please permit me to apologize.
I've heard him use those words many times before. He's also said, you know, leaving the jury box, the pine box, or the ballot box. So when is he going to face that jury box?
Well, he is set to go on trial on November 6th, just a few months from now, and it will really be up to that jury to decide what his legacy in Chicago politics really is.
This is a case that has been in the making for before this current term. Heather Sharon, thanks very much.
Thanks, Paris.
And read Heather's full story on our website. That's WTTW.com/news. Brandis.
Paris, Chicago's mayor-elect has only a short window between the time he's sworn into office next month and the end of the state legislature's session. So he's getting an early start. Amanda Finicky joins us now with more on Brandon Johnson's visit to the Illinois Capitol today. Amanda, what was Johnson's agenda in Springfield?
So, Brandis, he met privately with lawmakers and most notably the Speaker of the House and the President of the Senate. He will need them especially on board to advance his agenda. But he will also need a majority of lawmakers to back any city-driven bills. He made an introductory appeal before a joint session of the House and Senate today. In his speech, Johnson urged collaboration and went out of his way to extend a branch to lawmakers from outside the city, saying the narrative that state politics and state budget are a zero-sum game is a false narrative.
That if something is good for Chicago, well, that means we're taking something away from Peoria. They tell us that the challenges that we face in the city of Chicago and families like mine on the west side of Chicago aren't the same challenges shared by families from Rockford to Carbondale, from East St. Louis to Champaign.
While a lot of his remarks sounded like they came from a campaign stump speech, he also laid out a couple of specific asks from the General Assembly, like revamping how the state decides how much each school district gets in a manner that'll give more to CPS.
A revised school funding formula will not only help every community across the state, but it will also help ensure there is a nurse and a social worker in every single school in Chicago.
He also says Illinois should send all municipalities a greater share of the state income tax.
By increasing funding, this body can help provide Chicago and cities and towns across the state with the resources that are needed to build from the ground up. And when we build a better, stronger, safer Chicago, we are building a better, stronger, safer Illinois.
And Amanda, what are the chances of that happening?
Well, it's hard to say, really, because the budget is still being worked out. But the governor's proposal did not call for that increase in money going to municipalities. And the education funding formula that Illinois uses is still fairly fresh, and it took years to devise. So a total overhaul of it is unlikely. Though Chicago and other school districts will, by the way, likely get more money next year than this one. Now, Democrats may have liked what they heard, saw the standing ovations, but less so Republicans.
It was pure political theater, fantasy land, dangerously naive, a complete disassociation from the reality that we live here in the state of Illinois and they live in the city of Chicago.
In his remarks, Johnson prioritized public safety, but GOP lawmakers say last weekend's downtown violence was a national embarrassment and accused Johnson of mollycoddling criminals.
Refusing to condemn in the strongest terms possible what happened, terrorizing tourists is not an economic development strategy for the city of Chicago.
Johnson previously said of the weekend bedlam that it is not constructive to, quote, demonize youth. At a brief media availability, he stuck by that, saying young people make bad choices. That's part of being young. But he also says that he condemns what happened. Now, it is, by the way, notable, Brandis, that in his remarks, this opportunity before state lawmakers, he did not make appeals for other measures that are going to require collaboration from those in the Capitol. Namely, those are part of his campaign platform, including a higher tax on certain real estate transactions and a tax on financial transactions. Did not bring those up.
All right, interesting to see when he does. Amanda, thanks. We'll see you shortly. Talk about it more in Spotlight.
Sounds good.
Up next, community activists and their plans to demonstrate around the Democratic Convention. Stay with us.
Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by Alexandra and John Nichols, the Jim and Kay Mabey family, the Polk Brothers Foundation, and the support of these donors.
Now to some more of today's top stories. Testimony in the ComEd 4 trial has wrapped for the week with closing arguments slated for next week. Former high-level ComEd lobbyist John Hooker took the stand for a second day in his own defense, trying to shed doubt that he or any others participated in bribing the speaker to help pass legislation. It comes after 2+ days of testimony from ex-CEO Ann Pramaggiore.
Community activists say they're already making plans to demonstrate around the Democratic National Convention when it comes to Chicago in 2024.
And there still has been police killings of black and brown people in our city and across the country. This must change by government working with the people to make sure that these police killings come to an end.
The coalition to march on the DNC says ending police brutality is just one of their demands on their people's agenda that the group intends to deliver during the convention. The group is also arguing to protect immigrant rights as well as those of women and the LGBTQ community and the right for workers to unionize.
United Airlines pilots say they're still without a labor contract a day after the company announces a 51% revenue increase, this time over last year. More than 100 United pilots demonstrated outside United's headquarters at Willis Tower today. The Airline Pilots Association say they've been negotiating a new contract for more than 5 years. The group says the company's antiquated scheduling system pulls them away from families without notice and that their pay and retirement benefits lag behind industry peers.
New research from Northwestern Medicine shows long-haul COVID is not the same for everyone. Particularly, researchers have found a difference between those who were hospitalized with COVID and those who weren't.
I'm a social worker, so words are really all I have some days, and there is just difficulty finding it.
33-year-old Imani Ibrahim was not hospitalized with COVID and says she still hasn't regained her sense of smell and taste 3 years after her infection. She says she still has brain fog, fatigue, and headaches. The new study shows hospitalized patients performed worse than non-hospitalized patients on processing speed, attention, and working memory tasks, while those who were hospitalized had lower results, non-hospitalized, had lower results in attention tasks only. Researchers say long COVID occurs in approximately a third of COVID-19 survivors and is now the third leading neurological disorder in the country.
A beloved natural spot on the south side gets landmark designation. Chicago City Council today declared Promontory Point a Chicago landmark. That's the peninsula that juts out on Lake Michigan just off of DuSable Lakeshore Drive between 54th and 56th Streets. The landmark status means Promontory Point has more protections from any kind of further development or renovation.
Community members gathered tonight for the second of 4 forums on what Chicagoans want to see from their new police superintendent. Chicago Tonight's Nick Blumberg was there and filed this report.
It was a full house at St. Sabina in Auburn Gresham where members of the Community Commission on Public Safety and Accountability took a lot of comments and answered some questions from residents. It's part of the new process for the superintendent search where an independent panel will come up with 3 candidates for Mayor-elect Brandon Johnson to choose from. Interim Commissioner Ramel Terry says it's the first time Chicagoans really get to have a say before the slate of candidates is announced.
They should definitely be optimistic because this is the first time that this has ever been done, so you can't measure it against anything else. And we are showing ourselves, right? Like we are seeing a change across the city as it relates to this process because we are opening the doors to the superintendent search.
Commissioners heard comments on a range of issues, including on working with young Chicagoans, restoring trust in the department, and they heard multiple calls for a new superintendent from within the ranks of CPD.
A lot of these young people and a lot of adults do not trust police officers, and we have every reason not to. So the person that you select, they have to be a community person. They have to be somebody that has passion for people.
Officers need to see us as individuals as neighbors and not the N-word.
A lot of kids have mental health issues. They don't know how to speak up. They don't know how to read or write. And that's also parents' fault. And I will say that because sometimes some kids do not have parents. So in our reality, we need to try to be a parent to each other.
We should hire a superintendent from Chicago. Hire the number of police officers that's needed so that the police officers who are working cannot be overworked. This is why we have so many that are committing suicide
Our tax dollars fund the police, so we shouldn't have to beg or plead for humane, intelligent, and respectful policing. We have the right to demand it. Policing exists only with the consent of the people, and we do not consent to policing the way it has been practiced in this city.
The commission is set to hold a third forum online and a fourth on the north side. Reporting from St. Sabina Church, I'm Nick Blumberg for Chicago Tonight.
The commission is charged with recommending 3 candidates to the mayor by July 14th, who will have 30 days to choose one or ask for another slate of options. Up next, Mayor Lori Lightfoot's standing ovation with our Spotlight Politics team. Stay with us. Mayor Lori Lightfoot stays silent at her final city council meeting while Alderman Ed Burke says goodbye. We focus on that and more in tonight's Spotlight Politics with the team, of course, Amanda Vinicky, Heather Sharon, and Paris Schutz. So more than a dozen alder people said goodbye, praising Mayor Lightfoot today during the difficult COVID years for her governance then, as well as for all of her accomplishments. Paris, do you think she was kind of thinking, where were all of you when I was running for re-election?
I don't know what she was thinking, but sure, it might have felt a little hollow because there was such a breakdown in the relationship between her and so many council members. But look, I think it's an acknowledgement that when the dust settles here, whether you agreed or disagreed with the way she went about the job, it is one of the hardest jobs there is, period, I think. The last 4 years was one of the most tumultuous years in Chicago's history, and it's a tremendous personal sacrifice to get up and do the job, whether people think you did it well or not well. And it's an acknowledgement from council members that you served the city, you did the job to the best of your ability, you sacrificed your family and your life, and we're grateful for it.
Heather, were you surprised that she didn't say anything? She didn't say goodbye. Will she ever talk to us again?
At this point, probably not, although she's welcome to come on the show anytime she'd like. It is a missed opportunity, though, because she has a story to tell about the past 4 years, and she gave up a high-profile opportunity today to begin shaping her legacy as a former mayor of Chicago. I want to hear that story. The people of Chicago, I think, want to hear that story, even if it's an unhappy story, even if it's a somewhat angry or bitter story. We just don't know anything about what she's been going through. The last time she took questions was several days before she finished third in the first round of voting in the mayor's race.
Can I jump in and say legacies take decades to build? It was only a few years ago that Jane Byrne's legacy was revisited in city council. She left under similar circumstances, but then if you heard older people a couple years ago, they talked about her character, how funny she was. Chicago Fest she started. She kind of had the idea for the museum campus. Chicago Fest became Taste of Chicago. So there was this massive revisitation of her legacy. That might happen for Mayor Lightfoot in years or decades. I think Daley's legacy and Emmanuel's legacy still are kind of sorting themselves out.
Still coming together.
Totally, but I have to say that still, think about, as Heather noted, what a missed opportunity that really is for a mayor to at least say something that would inevitably be on every newscast. And her supporters, I think, would also be curious to hear from her where she stands, what she thinks about the city's future. She's been the leader of the city, and people are still looking to her. She is that leader now.
Through a very difficult time, and maybe she will, right? She's got how many days before inauguration?
Less than a month.
Less than a month. Okay, I want to keep it moving, though, because then there was the goodbye that many weren't even sure was going to happen. Take a listen to what outgoing Alderman Ed Burke said to his colleagues after 54 years on the job.
Edmund Burke, who wrote, "In politics, there are no permanent enemies, no permanent friends, only permanent interests."
Heather, are you surprised that he spoke at all, considering he's got a federal trial looming?
I was surprised, but Ed Burke spent decades treating the city council chambers as his own sort of personal rostrum, and I cannot tell you how many hours of my life I have lost to him sort of waxing philosophical about Chicago's history and the valor of Chicago's law enforcement agents. And after his colleagues started to praise him, I just think the temptation was just too great. But also, let's be clear, this is an institution that he has served for 54 years, longer than any of us here have been alive. And I don't doubt that he wanted to sort of begin to shape his legacy, which, as I said earlier, of course, will be determined by what the jury finds in his trial set to start in November.
And I think it can be easy on both his part, Lightfoot's, for outsiders to forget that these are humans, that this is a lot of emotion, a lot of raw feelings, and regardless of what happens with the trial, a lot of, as you noted, work and attention put into the city council. He might have his detractors, but nonetheless, put a lot of energy into it and probably has some feels.
Standing ovations, including Mayor Lightfoot. Paris, surprised at all?
Not surprised with some of the older people, but definitely surprised with the mayor, because there's a lot of performative anger in politics. But I think the relationship between Burke and Lightfoot was not performative. They really didn't like each other. But you don't want to be the one Debbie Downer at the party. If everyone else is standing, then I guess you are too. But to Heather's point, you know, Burke doled out favors. That's how he kept his power. Running the finance committee, he doled out workers to people. He doled out money to people that needed money and help. So it stands to reason that a lot of them have reverence for him, even though his front-facing legacy to the public is going to be much, much murkier.
And we all recall that first meeting, that first city council meeting, and the cantankerous relationship between the two of them. Quickly, I want to get to Mayor-elect Brandon Johnson trying to woo and befriend lawmakers in Springfield. Here he is.
When my administration arrives on the 5th floor of City Hall, we stand ready to work with every one of this legislative body and, of course, throughout the state capitol.
Amanda, what was the reception there?
I mean, it was really positive for the most part, at least from the Democratic majority, and they're the ones who called the shots. That said, he didn't bring up his most controversial issues, and that was, as mentioned earlier, the real estate transaction tax and the financial tax. So in a way, sort of skirting those, and he didn't get into specifics of how much he wants from the city. He said that would defy this whole spirit of collaboration. Directly asked, what do you want from state government? He didn't give a number. And really, this is all about numbers. He likes to say, I don't want to give choices. That's a false narrative. We hear that from him a lot. But guess what? He's going to have to make a lot of choices, as are members of the General Assembly.
Heavy is the head. That's Spotlight. Thanks, everybody. Amanda Vinicky, Heather Sharon, Paris Schutz. Up next, a photography show spotlights an artist who helped shape Black beauty in the 60s and 70s. But first, a look at the weather. From Stevie Wonder and high fashion models to everyday people all over the world, a photographer helped capture Black beauty and power in the 1960s and 70s. His name was Kwame Brathwaite, and he died soon after an exhibition of his work opened at the Art Institute. Chicago Tonight visited the museum for a look at one man's passion for possibility.
I say he's essentially synonymous with the Black is Beautiful movement and to developing the aesthetic that we associate with it and creating the images that allow us to look back and understand its trajectory.
Kwame Brathwaite photographed jazz vocalist Abbey Lincoln, reggae giant Bob Marley, and he toured the world to promote Pan-African creativity. Seen here in a self-portrait in the 1960s, the artist and activist documented things well worth waiting for.
You really see this career developing over time and these connections made with various people, and just the richness of his engagement and his commitment to both documenting Black culture and celebrating it and creating it all at the same time.
Brathwaite organized fashion shows and concerts. He photographed album covers, and he used his darkroom skills to shed light on pivotal moments of positivity and empowerment.
He was passionate about Black and white photography, really thought carefully about his printing and how to bring out Black skin tones, Black hair, and to bring out these tones and textures that film wasn't necessarily developed to process accurately.
A photographer for 7 decades, he found inspiration in music and musicians.
Throughout his career of making photographs, he's constantly reviewing albums, reviewing festivals, and music and photography for him are very intertwined. They're also intertwined at the level of composition. He was really interested in thinking about his photographs as responding to or relating to the rhythms of Black music. It's almost like you can hear the images sometimes. Something that I love about the exhibition is how, when you spend time with it, you can see the connections across various mediums and across various communities and moments and times.
Kwame Brathwaite died on April 1st at the age of 85. The exhibition of his work is in the modern wing of the Art Institute of Chicago until July 24th. You can discover more on our website.
That's our show for this Wednesday night. Join us tomorrow night live at 10. A dozen older people leave City Council. A look at the shift in council politics.
And we hear the latest on efforts to innovate downtown as part of our Chicago Tonight in Your Neighborhood series. Now, for all of us here at Chicago Tonight, I'm Brandis Friedman.
And I'm Paris Schutz. Thank you so much for watching. Stay healthy and safe, and we'll see you tomorrow.
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, a personal injury law firm dedicated to preserving the dignity and rights of all individuals.